children, don't follow me as an example, but look at my life as a warning. Every life, write this down. I had the care group leaders write it. Every life is either a warning or an example. It's either an example to follow or a warning not to follow. Touch your neighbor next to you and look them right in the eye and say, you're either a warning to me or an example for me. Some folks you can look at and say, oh my goodness, child, you really going through, aren't you? Yeah, been rough for 10 years. Tell me about it. We know it all started when I got married. To who? Just in case he knocks on my door and say, will you? What kind of person was he? Well, he just didn't like the work. Really? Yeah, I went and borrowed someone out of the projects. I kept talking to them about buying a house, but they kept saying, let's just stay right on here. Tell me some more. Why? Because your life is a warning to me. I get with people older than me, I've always asked them, I said, if you were my age and you had to do your life over again, what would you do differently? Amen. What are some of the things that you would have done at my age? What mistakes do you think that you made that may have been a setback? Why? Because I want their life to be either an example or a warning. Right now, you are either a walking example to follow or a warning to avoid. Amen. Touch your neighbor and say, what kind of messages are you sending? Any life can be duplicated. If you follow the recipe exactly. So like you may say, child, that cake was so good we will never taste another one like that again. If you follow the recipe and follow it in the order it was given. It's another level of mentorship. Show me the steps where you've walked so I can put my foot where you've left your prints and end up at the same destination. What do you want out of life? Find those that have arrived at their destination. You'll never become a successful doctor hanging out with lawyers. Anything wrong with lawyers? No. But law is not your destination. So guess what? You need to find yourself among those that are doctors. And you will never end up successfully at the place called winning if you are hanging around with a bunch of losers. Touch your neighbor and say, what are you running with? Then said I, in verse 16, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is what? Despised, and his words are not heard. The words of wise men are heard in quiet, more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Now, it is very clear that this poor man's word was not heard. I want you to know something. Poverty, notice when you go to a neighborhood, the poor neighborhood the hole stays in the pothole stays in the street a little longer than in the rich neighborhood. Amen. The poor neighborhood, the trash stays out a little longer than in the rich. Why? Because you have no wealth to amplify your voice. So now when we begin to go back to Proverbs 22, we've got to ask ourselves the question. He says in verse 4, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Thorns and snares are in the way of the forward. He that doth keep his soul shall be far from them. Then it begins, so it gives you what to do in order to be wealthy. Then it tells you what to do to stay away from your soul being ensnared. Then it says, train up the child in the way that he should go. Now, we shared already about a good name. And we're going to look a little bit about the good name today. In verse 1, it says, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. When a child comes forth, that child carries your name. A matter of fact, you're rearing that child to take your name to the next generation. Amen. When we begin to understand the training up of the child, amen, as we shared this morning, it means to dedicate or the rearing up. When we also understand that word, amen, I found something else very interesting. That word actually means to make narrow. You've got to narrow the very destiny of that child. You've got to guide the arrow in which way you want it to go. You can't let your children make their own choices, not even at 12. Child, they're teenagers now, so I let them, nah, they don't have enough sense. Amen. In their teenage years, they're crazier. They're wiser at 10. At their teenage years, they're out of control. Amen. Their voice is out of control. It's changing. And, like, things have to be harnessed at that age. They're not wise enough to make right decisions. Amen. Though they come into the rites of passage and they're inducted into manhood or womanhood, but they're in the introductory course. Amen. They have not mastered it yet. So they've got to be guided. That's why they should be with older individuals. Amen. You shouldn't tell them to be so much with, with their peers. Their peers can't help them. They're just as crazy as they are. Amen. So you have to help guide them to other adult life. And young men should be with older men. Yes. To teach them manhood so that their life can either be an example or a warning to them. And young girls should be with older women. And that they're beginning to teach them how to keep house, how to rear children, how to hold a baby. Amen. I think it's a sad thing when a woman has a baby at 20-something years old and for the first time she's saying, what do I do? Amen. She should have went through that process with an older woman. Amen. Training up. Now, when we begin to notice some things in the animal training, they do conditioning through rewards or punishment to associate certain cues with any of a broad variety of actions. Thus, laboratory rats can quickly learn to vacate a room when a